I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Day 4, Iran fires on U.S. targets in the Middle East as the region grows more violent. What we're learning about the president's plans. Plus, firepower fears.
There is a potential desperate and disastrous shortage.
Does America have what it takes to end the war? Why some lawmakers are concerned. Texas primaries, why today's vote in the Lone Star State could be a sign of things to come in November. Plus, the way of the Cros. We'll introduce you to the artist behind the latest edition at St. Peter's Basilica. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of St. Catherine Drexel. We begin tonight with the Iran war, where the death toll in the Middle East approaches 1,000. Most of those killed have been Iranian, but deaths have been reported in other countries. So far, the number of Americans killed since the fighting began on Saturday remains at 6 service members. The State Department has issued an advisory for all Americans in the Middle East, from Egypt to Iran, to get out. This comes after Iran struck the U.S. consulate in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Just hours ago, the U.S. consulate in Dubai was struck by an Iranian drone that hit an adjacent parking lot and sparked a limited fire.
A drone unfortunately struck a parking lot adjacent to the Chancellery building and set off a fire in that place. All personnel are accounted for. As you're aware, we began drawing down personnel from our diplomatic facilities in advance of this. In the cases, for example, of Beirut, we basically drew down to bare bones, as well as in Baghdad and in Erbil and in a couple other posts as well. So we've been very fortunate, obviously, but our embassies and our diplomatic facilities are under direct attack from a terroristic regime.
Meanwhile, Israel has intensified its fight against Hezbollah, saying it struck the organization's centers of gravity in Beirut, targeting command centers and weapons storage facilities. Today, the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. said Israel disrupted the effort in Iran to elect a new supreme leader.
It is true that we struck in an area where the electors were meeting to appoint a new supreme leader, somebody who would be in charge of spreading death and mayhem both in Iran and outside of Iran. And there's a very good chance that the electors will not be readily available for any further meetings.
In Washington, President Donald Trump says Iran has no Navy, no Air Force, and no air detection, and no radar after U.S. and Israeli attacks knocked them out, adding that it's coming along very well. The president made the comments while welcoming Germany's chancellor to the White House for discussions on trade and the expanding conflict in the Middle East. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Veronica, good evening to you. President Donald Trump also said today just about everything's been knocked out, that the U.S. military is doing a fantastic job, and that Iran's missile count is going way down.
With the German chancellor sitting next to him in the Oval Office, President Donald Trump updates reporters on the war against Iran.
And the leader of the pack is gone. And as you know, 49 people were taken out in the first hit. And I guess there was another hit today on the new leadership, and it looks like that was pretty substantial also.
And he says Iran has very much been beaten militarily.
They're still lobbing some missiles. At some point, they won't even be able to do that because we're hitting all of their carriers, we're hitting all of their missile stock.
The German chancellor weighs in as well, saying he hopes the war will come to an end as soon as possible.
We are supporting the United States and Israel to get rid of this terrible terrorist regime.
NATO emphasizes it is not involved in the war against Iran, but the head of the defense group is thankful Iran's supreme leader is dead, especially after Iran killed thousands of protesters.
So I think we are all better off with him gone and with the nuclear and ballistic capability being beaten and degraded as it is as we speak.
Despite the nuclear threat from Iran, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran was not close to building a nuclear weapon.
Yes, many reasons for concern, but there wasn't to be a bomb tomorrow or the day after tomorrow.
But the administration pushes back against that claim.
But if we didn't do what we're doing right now, you would have had a nuclear war, and they would have taken out many countries because you know what? They're sick people. They're mentally ill, sick people. They're angry. They're crazy.
The president says people are happy with what we did, adding, "You could never have had true peace in the Middle East if Iran was allowed to have nuclear weapons and missiles."
They've hit Qatar. They've hit UAE. They've hit Saudi Arabia. They've hit Oman. They were helping us negotiate. They got hit. Everybody got hit because they're evil and they're bad.
When asked by reporters what would be a worst-case scenario for Iran, President Trump said someone taking over that country was as bad as the previous leader was. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Neighboring Iraq has already felt some of the fallout from the Iran war, but the greater fear for many is what lies ahead. Archbishop Bashar Warda, the Chaldean Archbishop of Erbil, Iraq, joins us now. Your Excellency, can you tell us what is the situation on the ground right now, and how are families coping with renewed fears of violence tied to Iran and its proxies?
It's like a quite frightening time because what we call always, whenever violence rises, old questions. It comes again. Will it reach us? Will we have to really leave again? Will our children have a future? You know, there's no schools, no colleges, no universities. Everything have been, stopped almost a week. Economy is collapsing. There was already a crisis in the economy, not to mention that from time to time there's these kind of missiles, passing the sky of Erbil, we don't know, and around probably every 3-4 hours there's like Erbil would be hit by either rockets or drones. The fear is there. The fear is there, and the scope of violence is just getting bigger because following the news, we see that new countries being attacked and new places being attacked. All of these questions would always be kind of like disturbing for families.
Now, life has effectively stopped, as you mentioned, and the future is so unknown. As tensions rise between Iran, Israel, and the United States, what are your greatest concerns for Iraq's Christian minority, as you mentioned, especially if the conflict expands into a broader regional war?
Well, Erbil is being targeted a few times so far, and we know the largest Christian gatherings in Iraqi Christian gatherings is in Erbil, and this might be also another reason for the Christians to say there's no future, and when God's will, this would end soon. Probably we would see some families coming to us and saying, "Look, Bishop, we tried to stay. There was what you call a commitment to stay, but it looks like the region is not stable in that sense." That's my biggest fear. Whatever we are trying with your prayers, with your support, with the whole support that we get to really build something for the Christian community to stay, these types of like wars and conflicts will shake everything.
Archbishop Warda, please be assured of our prayers for you and your community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
President Trump has said the war in Iran may take 4 to 5 weeks or even longer. Thousands of U.S. troops and billions of dollars of military weapons have been committed to the operation. Now, some are asking if the U.S. has enough high-tech missiles for a long-term war. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us with the answer. Eric.
Good evening, Veronica. Lawmakers tell me yes, however, only in the short term. It's been well documented by defense officials that there is a growing shortage of THAAD interceptor missiles. Now, these are the ones that crash into oncoming Iranian missiles. After a briefing by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, House Speaker Mike Johnson said that this is why there is an urgency by U.S. forces to destroy Iran's missile capacity.
The objective was not regime change, The objective was to take out those missiles, the short and mid-range missiles, and their ability to produce them.
But does the U.S. have enough missiles to do that? Lawmakers and defense analysts say those missiles and air defense interceptors are the same ones the U.S. gave to Ukraine and now protect Israel. And inventory is dwindling, and that's a real concern.
There is no question that not only our intelligence, but public testimony has indicated there is a shortage of interceptors that are vital for the defense systems, the THAADs and other munitions that are necessary for protecting American assets there.
You know, the headlines over the weekend that, we need a quick finish because we're running out of munitions, those are headlines that our adversaries read, and they pay attention to that.
In a show of strong U.S. defense, the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee is confident we have what's necessary.
We're in very good shape. There's a very good blend of weaponry, offensive and defensive, and I think we're going to be just fine.
Last June, during the Iran-Israel conflict, U.S. forces fired off more than 150 high-altitude interceptors. That's roughly a quarter of the total global inventory, in addition to a large number of ship-based Standard missiles to protect allies. And analysts say replenishing these high-end systems can take more than a year because production lines are optimized for peacetime. Bottom line, manufacturing these land-based interceptors take time. Lockheed Martin builds them at several states. However, only around 90 are built in a year. Lawmakers hope with the billions in the recently passed One Big Beautiful Bill, Lockheed is now pushing to quadruple production to 400 a year over the next 7 years. However, each interceptor is estimated cost about $13 million. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Retired Vice Admiral Robert Moret is a faculty member in the Department of Public Administration and International Affairs and serves as the Deputy Director of the Syracuse University Institute for Security, Policy, and Law. Thank you so much for joining me. Now we can start on Monday. President Trump accused former President Joe Biden of failing to replenish U.S. weapons stockpiles, though he insisted that the U.S. is still stocked to win as Operation Epic Fury continues. What is the current state of America's munitions supply?
Yeah, great question, Veronica. From what I understand, just reading accounts of other discussions I've had, is that there are concerns which were voiced originally by the chairman of the Joint Staff, General Kane, last week, about what we call high demand, low density weapon stocks, which is not a new thing. That's something we always have to track very, very carefully going back, my own experience, decades. But as you draw down your inventories of some of these high demand, low density weapons, especially long range precision weapons, Tomahawk cruise missiles, Patriot missile magazines, and so forth. You have to keep track of that. And I don't think you can blame any one particular president for how many we have or don't have, but it's certainly something you need to keep an eye on.
Now, the administration has been pursuing an air campaign, but both Defense Secretary and the President have left the door open for boots on the ground. In your opinion, is that likely when we're looking at the duration and scope of this?
I put it into two categories, Veronica. I think it's an important point. My own sense is that we're probably not going to put large numbers of ground troops in Iran. That's just, from reading the newspapers, and we could all have different opinions on that. On the other hand, there is also always something we call combat search and rescue elements, and I'm absolutely certain that there are on standby units prepared to, for example, if we had any downed aviators over land in Iran, that would be able to go in there and get them out. That is technically boots on the ground if you look at it that way. So I think it has to do with what kind of contingency you're talking about. I don't expect a huge major regional conflict such as we had in Iraq in 2003 with large numbers of troops going to Iran. But on the other hand, there are contingencies for special forces and, as I said, combat rescue that always need to be prepared.
Now, Secretary Rubio made some comments recently about Israel and what triggered some strikes. Could you offer some clarification?
Yeah, I don't know if I can clarify it completely. I think his remarks yesterday have created a lot of interest, and the sense that I got just from reading the same reports everybody else is seeing, that there was some sense that the Israelis were prepared to take this action against the Iranian leadership at the leadership compound there in the middle of Tehran. and regardless of what anybody else is going to do, and did approach us saying that that might be an opportunity for the United States to do something concurrent with that. Now, the wording is important here. I mean, it's not as if the sense that I have listening to Secretary Rubio and others, the Israelis said that you have to do this because we're doing that. I think that's overstating it. But there was certainly a connection, and we had active discussions with the Israelis leading up to this, and they were determined, from what I can see in all the press accounts, to conduct the attack that they did against the leadership targets, and that would have implications for us.
Retired Vice Admiral Robert Moret, thank you so much.
Good to see you again, Veronica. Good day.
Thanks. The strikes on Iran have triggered a massive shift in the global economy. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has halted nearly 25% of the world's oil and gas trade. Energy prices are responding, with Brent crude surging past $80 a barrel. European gas prices jumped 20% in a single morning, and shipping has been halted in the region. Economists warn that a prolonged blockade could drive oil over $100, potentially reigniting global inflation. Sell-off today, dropping over 1,100 points in the Dow Industrial Average, lost 423 points. The S&P 500 slipped 1%, and the Nasdaq shed 1.1%. Just hours ago, President Trump posted on Truth Social that he has ordered the U.S. Development Finance Corporation to provide political risk insurance and guarantees for financial security of all maritime trade, especially traveling through the Gulf. He said, quote, "If necessary, the United States Navy will begin escorting tankers through the Strait of Hormuz as soon as possible." We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. Parental petition. The Supreme Court sides with parents in a major case regarding gender identity. We have the update. And Texas voters head to the polls for the first primaries of the year. Why this race may be historic. Tonight, as the Pope is leaving Castel Gandolfo near Rome, EWTN got the chance to ask him about the recently sentenced Jimmy Lai.
Will you comment on Jimmy Lai being sentenced to 20 years in prison under Hong Kong's national security law?
Yeah, I can't comment on that. Let's pray for less hatred and for more peace and work for authentic dialogue. God bless you all.
Hong Kong pro-democracy advocate Jimmy Lai was sentenced to 20 years behind bars last month. He was accused of colluding with foreign forces under the city's national security law. The United States Supreme Court has granted an emergency stay, effectively suspending a California law that prohibited school districts from notifying parents of a student's gender transition. The order follows a legal challenge brought by a conservative advocacy group on behalf of religious parents and educators. The plaintiffs argue that state policies infringe upon parental rights by facilitating social transitions without family consent. California officials maintain that such disclosures violate a minor's right to privacy and could compromise student safety. With this intervention, the High Court allows parental notification requirements to resume, while the broader constitutional merits of the case are litigated in lower courts. Polls are open across Texas for the nation's first major primary of the 2026 midterm cycle. This is also the first election conducted under the state's new redistricting map. It remains in place following a Supreme Court stay in December. At the top of the ticket, Senator John Cornyn faces a fierce challenge from Attorney General Ken Paxton and Congressman Wesley Hunt. A May runoff is a strong possibility. On the Democratic side, the race to challenge the GOP is a toss-up between Jasmine Crockett and James Talrico. Governor Greg Abbott also seeks a fourth term against a crowded primary field. Polls close at 7 p.m. local time, and anyone in line by the deadline is legally entitled to vote. Joining me now to discuss is Andrew Walworth, host of the Real Clear Politics radio show on Sirius XM. Thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be here. Thanks,
So,
Veronica.
do you think the Texas primary will be a bellwether for the midterm elections?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you've got a lot of so much is in play. You know, a lot depends on who wins. Obviously, our average, the RCP average, shows Paxton at about 40%, Cornyn at 36.3%. Hunt, who's the representative down there, is at 15.5%. So that's an interesting race on the Republican side, because that's probably going to lead to a runoff, which happens in May 26th. On the Democratic side, of course, you've got Crockett and Tallarico. Crockett is behind right now in the most recent polls that I've seen. Probably not a runoff. So it really depends in Texas of, if it's Cornyn versus Crockett, that's one thing. Everything that we've seen, every real clear average shows that the Republican winning any matchup you make. The Republicans haven't lost a statewide race in Texas since '94, so probably a Republican's going to pull it off. And what it says about the country as a whole, I don't know. I will say this: if a Democrat wins in Texas, that means it's a blowout night for the Democrats across the board. So that's one thing we'll be watching for in this race.
Now, as you alluded to, there are some different scenarios. How will the new redistricting map affect the House elections?
Well, that's another good question. There's, each of these, they are using the new maps. And the question, I think, will be about the Hispanic vote. The Republicans have sort of made a bet that the Hispanic voters who voted for Trump last time around will remain Republicans. That's not what we're seeing nationally right now. But there's a big swing in the Hispanic vote towards the Democrats. And if that carries, then these districts may not make that big a difference at all.
Now, President Trump was in Texas a few days ago. How much influence does he have over these primaries?
Well, maybe none at this point, because he did not endorse any of the three candidates on the Senate side. That's the race that everyone's sort of watching. I think that they would like, at least the Republican Senate committee is pretty clear. They want Cornyn to win. They think that Paxton puts the seat in jeopardy. They may be right about that. They may be wrong. If it's Paxton versus Tallarico, that would be the race that I think the Republicans would be most fearful about. And that looks like the most, or a likely scenario at this point.
Now, as voters head to the polls, what are some of the issues that they're concerned about?
Well, it's the economy. That's been the big issue down there. I think that, though, and that is sort of the conventional wisdom, I was sort of struck at the State of the Union how much Trump talked about social issues and sort of forced the Democrats to sort of stand up or sit down on a number of social issues and sort of really put them on the spot.
Andrew Walworth, thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Great to see you, Veronica. Take care.
Thanks. You too. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, A New Way. After St. Peter's Basilica holds an international art competition to create new stations of the cross, one winner reveals his work. As part of the 400th anniversary of the dedication of St. Peter's Basilica, the Fabric of St. Peter is presenting a new depiction of the way the cross for Lent inside the Basilica. The 14 paintings come from Switzerland and are the work of an artist committed to portraying Christian themes of suffering and hope. EWTN Vatican journalist Benedict Sedegren has more.
The Via Crucis was selected after an international competition launched in December 2023. A commission of art historians, liturgists, and Vatican representatives unanimously chose the winning design from among more than 1,000 submissions from 80 countries. Manuel Andreas Dur, a 36-year-old artist and father of 3, was chosen for the task, which he described both as an honor and a challenge.
Jesus is someone who millions of people, billions of people have a relationship with and have an idea of already. And so it's quite a challenge, of course, to get near a way of representing it. But then I also realized quite fast that these are not paintings that should stand alone. They have their place in the Basilica.
The 14 stations portray events in the Passion of Christ, from his condemnation by Pontius Pilate to his being placed in the tomb. The Swiss artist spent 8 months painting them in oils, then had to wait for weeks for the paint to dry before the stations could be unveiled on the first Friday of Lent. Dur says that some stations move him more than others, like the crucifixion and Jesus being taken down from the cross. But the most striking is Veronica wiping Christ's face with her veil.
it goes to the central mystery of how a God could become human and how a God would leave an imprint on a piece of cloth. For me, this was a beautiful meditation on what it would mean to find God in all of reality, through things, to see something more through something.
Every day, the paintings are seen by thousands of faithful and visitors passing through. The Christian artist hopes that his paintings can serve as a way to enter more deeply into the Passion of Christ and the mystery of the resurrection.
What always fascinated me about the Christian faith is that it brings together so many different aspects of our lives and of our existence. And with the Via Crucis in a special way, it puts suffering in the very center of the faith. Then of course it's redeemed suffering. There's, after the 14 stations, of course there's the resurrection. So it is infused with hope, and it tells the story of salvation. It doesn't leave us in the suffering, it tells a better story, and that's really what fascinates me.
In Rome, Benedict Cedergren for EWTN News Nightly.
We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.